The National Desk, America's News, now.
What we're trying to do here at the White House is work feverishly to get this ceasefire deal in place so we can get at the very least 6 weeks of calm.
The Biden team ramping up pressure on warring sides to come to a truce as the prospects of a regional conflict grow and the death toll of Palestinians in Gaza passes another grim milestone.
That investigation has revealed a broad, underground criminal network responsible for distributing large quantities of ketamine.
Bombshell arrests made in connection to the death of Friends star Matthew Perry. What we know about the 5 people tied to the tragedy. And Hurricane Ernesto barrels towards Bermuda. How the monster storm could impact your weekend plans. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Right now, talks for a truce underway in Qatar. The Biden administration says it is working feverishly for a ceasefire deal that could bring a 10-month-long war in Gaza to a halt and stave off a wider regional conflict with Iran, which has rejected calls to stand down on a planned retaliatory attack.
We have to assume, and the information that we have tells us, that Iran has not moved off its threat to launch some kind of an attack on Israel, perhaps even using their proxies as well, like Hezbollah or the Houthis. So our assumption is that their thinking is still in that vein.
The U.S. believes that attack in response to the killing of a senior Hamas political leader could be any day now and threatening to further escalate tensions, a growing death toll in Gaza that just hit a grim milestone. More than 40,000 Palestinians in Gaza now killed, according to Gaza health authorities. The count does not distinguish between civilians and militants, but a UN analysis shows more than half of those killed are women and children. Both Hamas and Israeli negotiators continue to trade blame over who's responsible for holding up the deal. According to CNN, Hamas reps are not at these current talks, but say they are open to speaking to mediators should there be a new proposal offered. On the table is a U.S.-backed plan that includes a 6-week halt in fighting, the release of Israeli hostages, and Palestinians being held in Israeli jails. GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump stepping up his criticism of Vice President Kamala Harris, who he says is avoiding the press. At a news conference in Bedminster, New Jersey today, Trump called Harris a radical left Democrat who does not know how to fix the economy and said he would make America affordable again.
You don't have to imagine what a Kamala Harris presidency would be because you're living through that nightmare right now, and it is a nightmare.
Earlier today, Vice President Harris and President Biden appeared together at an event in Maryland for the first time since Biden dropped out of the presidential race.
There's a lot of love in this room for our president. And I think it's for many, many reasons, including few leaders in our nation have done more on so many issues, including to expand access to affordable health care than Joe Biden.
They announced a landmark deal to cut costs for 10 popular Medicare drugs. The White House saying taxpayers are expected to save at least $6 billion on the newer prices. The drugs include blood thinners like Eliquis and diabetes drugs like Jardiance. Harris plans to deliver her first economic policy speech in North Carolina tomorrow. She's expected to call for a federal ban on grocery and food price gouging. Her campaign says this would prevent corporations from raising prices and everyday consumer costs. Meantime, on the vice presidential front, we are learning today that Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will take the stage for a debate with CBS News on October 1st. And tonight, a request from Donald Trump that his sentencing in the New York hush money case be moved to after the November election. The Republican nominee argues that if sentencing goes forward as scheduled on September 18th, it would be election interference. Judge Juan Merchan has not ruled on the request. Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover up an alleged extramarital sexual encounter that happened before the 2016 election. We are tracking bombshell developments here in this investigation into the death of Friends star Matthew Perry. 5 people now charged in connection with his death from a ketamine overdose last year, including the actor's assistant and 2 doctors. Here's what U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada had to say.
These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways.
Perry was found face down in the pool at his Pacific Palisades home last October. He was found the same day that he received several injections of ketamine from his live-in personal assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa. Authorities say last fall, a doctor distributed ketamine to Perry and Iwamasa outside the usual course of professional practice and without legitimate medical purpose on at least 7 different occasions. So far, 2 of the defendants, including Iwamasa, have pleaded guilty to the charges. A U.S.-Russian dual citizen now set to serve 12 years in a Russian prison. A court convicted Ksenia Karolina for treason today over a $50 charity donation she made. Russia says she collected money for an organization that helped fund the Ukrainian military. Russian police arrested Karolina earlier this year, and she pleaded guilty last week. And we continue to follow Ukraine's surprising counteroffensive into Russia's Kursk region, a potentially dramatic shift in the conflict. Experts now say the seemingly successful incursion could be used as a bargaining chip as Ukraine looks to gain an upper hand in the 2-year battle that began when Russia invaded Ukraine. The move has forced Russia's President Putin to redirect troops from the battlefield. Retired General Wesley Clark believes it is imposing significant damage.
So I think this is more a problem for Putin and his leadership elite because it shows his leadership is not effective.
And tracking your money tonight, Americans are spending a lot despite persistently high inflation and interest rates. A new government report shows retail sales surged last month, rising 1% from the month before. That's higher than the downwardly revised 0.2% drop we saw in June. The biggest increase was at car dealerships. And the number of people applying for unemployment benefits, that fell last week. Jobless claims dropping to 227,000, a decrease of 7,000 from the week before. At least 1.8 million Americans were collecting unemployment benefits the week ending on August 3rd. The falling numbers indicate a resilient job market. A new lawsuit is revealing details about an alleged data breach that may have impacted billions of people in at least 3 countries, including the United States. According to court documents, Social Security numbers could have been sold on the dark web. The National Desk's Atra El-Nashar has a closer look at what happened.
With everything from payments to signatures happening in digital form these days, most are aware of the ever-present threat of their data getting into the wrong hands. But what's not normal is what allegedly happened around April of this year to the background check company National Public Data. According to this class action lawsuit against the company, a cybercriminal group called US DoD accessed National Public Data's network and withdrew almost 3 billion pieces of encrypted personal data, names, social security numbers, addresses, and more.
This is a big breach, and we shouldn't take it lightly.
McAfee Chief Technology Officer Steve Grobin says it's extremely helpful to hackers that it was all in one place.
All of that information can be used by cybercriminals to take advantage of these victims and execute a wide range of cybercrime.
The suit alleges the data was compromised, published, and then sold on the dark web due to defendants' negligent and/or careless acts and omissions, and their utter failure to protect customers' sensitive data. This post is believed to show the hackers trying to sell it for $3.5 million. But the data reportedly ended up being leaked to a hacker forum for free. The magnitude of the breach is shocking. So is what the company allegedly did or didn't do after.
Based on the class action lawsuit that's been filed, NPD has not made an official notification regarding the exact details.
Instead, third-party security firms now have to go through client data to see who's been affected. National Public Data did not respond to our request for comment by airtime. Government officials have taken notice. Florida Senator Rick Scott says the lack of notification is disturbing and unacceptable and calls for a transparent federal response. If you're worried about your data, experts suggest signing up for credit monitoring and consider freezing your credit. As this lawsuit allegedly shows, your data may get into the wrong hands months before you even find out. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar reporting.
Atra, thank you. Coming up, a dramatic rise in whooping cough cases plaguing several states, the symptoms and what parents need to know. Plus, uncertified teachers in schools, where it's happening the most and why some say funding is the leading cause. And later, driverless cars already on the roads in several states and being tested in a few more. What we're learning about their safety when we come back. Welcome back. Hurricane Ernesto moving across open waters after pounding Puerto Rico with torrential rain and knocking out power yesterday. The storm located northeast of the Turks and Caicos Islands right now. Rainfall could begin to affect Bermuda as Ernesto strengthens into a major hurricane. Ernesto is forecast to remain offshore on the east coast, but heavy swells could cause life-threatening conditions through this weekend. In your health alert, the CDC has issued a warning about a virus on the rise in both children and adults. Medical reporter Liz Bona is sharing who's at risk and how to lower the odds you'll catch it.
Hey there, everybody. CDC issuing this alert because they've seen a dramatic rise in what's called human parvovirus B19. It is a common illness in children, but they're especially worried about those who have compromised immunity and for women who are pregnant.
The concern is that the virus can be transmitted during pregnancy from mother to child. And as many kids head back to school,
it is very highly contagious, and I think that's the other reason they put this out, is it is probably going to go through schools very quickly.
infectious disease specialist Dr. Stephen Blatt of Ohio's Tri-Health told me the Health Alert Network advisory from the CDC is really alerting healthcare providers to be on the lookout for this seasonal respiratory virus.
It's a virus that's common in childhood. It's called fifth disease in childhood, and but adults can get it if they didn't have it in childhood.
Parvovirus B19 tends to hit in two phases, with fever and fatigue about 7 days after infection. And in the second phase, about 10 days later, kids get a slapped cheek look from a facial rash.
So if your kid comes home with a fever and their cheeks are bright red, it's a pretty good chance that's fifth disease.
Adults sometimes have no symptoms until this second phase, when a rash shows up along with pretty bad joint pain.
Sometimes it's not obvious what it is, and there's blood tests you can do to check and see if that's what it is.
Now, because this is passed through respiratory droplets, it's tough to avoid, but hand washing, wearing a mask, not sharing food or drinks with others can help you reduce the odds of catching it. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonas reporting.
Meantime, this back-to-school season, we're also tracking a troubling rise in whooping cough illnesses. The CDC says weekly reported cases are at the highest level seen in years. At least 259 cases during the first week of August, up from 215 towards the end of June. Pennsylvania and New York, those are the two states reporting the largest number of people impacted. Symptoms initially present like the common cold, but progress into an aggressive cough and difficulty breathing. Schools are still struggling to improve record levels of absenteeism seen after the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Associated Press and a Stanford University economist, around 25% of students were chronically absent in the 2022-23 school year, and that's up from 15% from before COVID. The numbers are going in the right direction now, though, most states improving year over year. Police in Washington have identified a person of interest in a deadly Skagit County house fire that happened last weekend. Authorities believe Jason Berman was at the property before the fire, noting that his blue Chevrolet pickup truck is unaccounted for. 3 people were found dead in that home that was completely destroyed.
Just the fact that there were several victims supposedly found in the rubble, and it seems like the fire really burnt fast and hard all the way down to the foundation, so it just kind of leads you to question what was the situation there.
The U.S. is not giving up on its efforts to let gymnast Jordan Chiles keep the bronze medal she won in the Olympic floor exercises. The Court of Arbitration for the sport says Romania's Ana Barbosu should get the bronze because Chiles' request to revise the score was submitted late, and there was no dispute about it during a hearing. U.S. officials say they couldn't properly prepare for the hearing because the court sent important emails to the wrong email address. Actress Jenna Rollins, she has died at the age of 94. Representatives of her filmmaker son, Nick Cassavetes, confirming her death yesterday after revealing she had Alzheimer's disease earlier this year. Rollins is hailed as one of the greatest actors, earning multiple Emmys and Golden Globes. She was best known for her roles in the 1974 movie A Woman Under the Influence and The Notebook from 2004. This is the National Desk America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. From shoplifting losses piling up across supermarkets in Pennsylvania to a new program in Portland, Oregon to ensure every student gets fed. We are taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Texas, where more than 1/3 of new teachers hired across the state are uncertified.
Proliferation of uncertified teachers in Texas schools is detrimental to student learning, student safety, and teacher morale.
For the last few years, uncertified teachers have been a sort of stopgap to address ongoing teacher shortages across the state.
Over 1/3 of the 49,000 newly hired teachers last year did not have a teaching certificate. That's over 16,600 uncertified teachers.
Numbers from the Texas Education Agency show that's an all-time high, but those uncertified teachers can lead to a subpar education. They have lower retention rates than certified teachers, and they tend to lead to lower performance among students. Democrats say the answer is clear. Make the teaching profession a desirable one by increasing pay. Republicans have pushed for other options.
If somebody's going to be teaching my kid math, I would have a preference for somebody who went to college and got a degree in mathematics, as opposed to somebody who went to college and studied education for 4 years.
Hungry kids will soon be a thing of the past at Portland Public Schools. The district is set to offer free food for all students this school year.
We want them to feel included.
Whitney Ellersick, a mom and the district's senior director of nutrition services, says this will be a game changer for kids.
We really want to see a decrease in the stigma that's attached to school lunch, and that it's not just for certain students based on their family's socioeconomic.
PPS parent Jeff Oswald tells me this is good news. He hopes this trend continues until every kid in the U.S. has a free meal they can count on.
With the socioeconomical challenges that a lot of families are facing, I think it's a huge win.
Garrity's Supermarkets has multiple locations across northeastern Pennsylvania. Co-owner Joe Fasula says he's noticed an increase in thefts in his stores in the past few years, which can be a major issue for any business.
Sure. So in the industry, it's called shrink. It's what shrinks your bottom line.
Fasula says oftentimes shoplifters will go after higher-priced items like meat as well as health and beauty care items. Higher-priced items being stolen leads to a higher rate of shrink or lost revenue. Any store losing too much money in thefts will have an overwhelmingly negative effect on both the business and the consumer.
If we lose 1% of our sales in theft, we have to raise prices. We don't have a choice.
Though Fasula has noticed shoplifting increasing at his stores over the years, he says that himself and many other stores rely heavily on law enforcement, prosecuting shoplifters to deter the behavior.
The law enforcement in our area is great.
And coming up, the makers of driverless vehicles claim they are safe, but others are not so sure. A closer look at both sides of the coin when we come back. Getting where you need to go is becoming more high-tech every day. In a handful of cities around the country, you can already take a robo-taxi with no driver. And testing for so-called autonomous vehicles right on public roads is expanding fast. So what does that mean for your safety? Spotlight on America correspondent Angie Moreski investigates.
The future is here. Driverless vehicles on America's roads, picking up passengers in robo-taxis and delivering goods in autonomous trucks.
What was once science fiction is now a reality.
Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association Executive Director Jeff Ferris says half of U.S. states have now passed laws welcoming autonomous vehicles. Truly driverless vehicles with no human observer are already operating in California, Nevada, Arizona, and Texas. We also know test vehicles are on the roads with backup human drivers in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Arkansas.
How safe really are these vehicles that they're being tested on the public roads?
What we know from more than 70 million autonomous miles being driven on public roads is that autonomous vehicles are far safer than human-driven vehicles.
Farah calls the technology a game changer for safety. He cites several studies, including one by robotaxi company Waymo, that reported an 85% reduction in injury crashes compared to human drivers. He also sent us multiple videos showing autonomous vehicles avoiding crashes. But safety experts say that's not the full picture.
It has the potential to be safe, but what we're seeing is a lot of loose ends.
Phil Koopman is an international safety expert on autonomous vehicles, now a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. His research extends nearly 30 years. A frequent critic of the industry's safety claims, he calls them misleading.
Most of those 70 million miles had a safety driver. So if something goes wrong, there was a person to stop the bad thing from happening. The number of miles without a safety driver to intervene is much less.
Spotlight on America asked the AV Industry Association how many of those miles were driven without a human backup driver, but a spokesperson told us they didn't have that breakdown.
I got a unmanned vehicle that was kind of taken off from me. It's a Waymo car.
Several recent high-profile incidents have raised concerns.
Your car here drove into oncoming lanes of traffic.
Phoenix police body cam video shows a traffic stop in June after a Waymo robotaxi was spotted driving the wrong way in a construction zone. No one was injured there, but a pedestrian was seriously injured in an accident involving a GM Cruise robotaxi in San Francisco last October.
What are the limitations of this technology when on the roads?
It has no intelligence. It doesn't think like a person. It just is trained, and when it hits something it hasn't been trained on, it just guesses. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong.
Farah points out that humans are often wrong too and insists the industry is making safety a priority. For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
All right, Angie, thank you. And up next, saved at sea, the last-minute move in the middle of a fire that saved 6 lives.
No good, man.
Yeah, that's the sound of relief. 6 people saved off the coast of Maine after their fishing boat caught fire. Before abandoning ship, Captain Robbie Roberge was able to send a radio message to the Coast Guard telling them their position in the Gulf of Maine. All but the captain were wearing survival suits. They were rescued 2 hours later by a Coast Guard cutter out of Portland. Just a miraculous story, and we're so happy to leave it on that positive note. We do want to thank you for joining us here at the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. I'm Amira David. Have a great night.